So thank you everyone for taking the time to visit us on Indie Author Day. My name is Garrard, and I'm the deputy editor of Rice Paper and founder of Dark Helix Press. And Jen here, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jen Frankel. I'm sometimes an editor for Dark Helix Press and have been a slush pile editor for Amazing Stories magazine and a writer myself.
And Alan Cho, our executive editor of Rice Paper, is sending his regrets today, so it'll just be the two of us entertaining you guys today. So a little bit of what we're going to speak about. So introduction to the speakers, a little bit about Rice Paper. Most of our presentation is going to be number 3, which is why you're here, which is publishing in anthologies or magazines. And then we'll do a short wrap up and questions afterwards. So just some nicer pictures of ourselves. And then, so a bit about Rice Paper. I mean, if you're here, you already know, Rice Paper has had a long history. It was started by Jim Wong Chu, Sky Lee, Paul Yee back in the 60s. So it's been around for quite a bit. It used to be a print magazine. And then, typical of a lot of other magazines, a lot of the grant funding dried up. So we've become solely online magazine now. And then now, I think about every 2 years, we come out with a paperback book, which we call an anthology of Rice Paper. So we've had 2 so far. We're working on our 3rd, which will come out next year, in which we go through the best of Rice Paper writings on our website, and we gather them into a collection. We also had 2 other books. One is The 7 Muses, Vincent's book, Vincent Tornado's book. I can't pronounce names right now. And then we also have Immersion, which is a speculative fiction anthology. So the next panel will be inviting all the Immersion authors to do readings from their pieces in this book. And this is published on Dark Helix Press, so have a look. So first of all, if you're here, I assume that you're a writer and you're interested in submitting to magazines. So one of the things about submitting to magazines is that it's quite a competitive market. So it's a buyer's market, and there's something called slush piles. So slush pile is when everything comes into a magazine, and then some poor editor has to go through everything and pick the best pieces to publish. I mean, in general, although we've only worked at a couple of magazines, Jen and I also did some slush pile reading for Amazing Stories, a science fiction magazine. Generally, the process is the same. I mean, you get a bunch of stuff, you have to sort through it, pick out the best, and it goes through editing before it goes to publishing. Now, Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between literary magazine genres and anthologies and stuff like that?
Sure. The most important thing when you're submitting, of course, is to know what you're submitting to and to make sure that what you're submitting matches what they're looking for. And format is probably the very first thing that you need to be looking at. So there's a lot of literary magazines in this country, in Canada, and there's a lot of university presses, other places that take literary stories. Gosh, I always get into trouble when I start talking about the difference between genre and literary work. But there's often it's just a question of whether there's a speculative element or not, and often the magazine will tell you itself whether it's a literary magazine or whether it's a more niche or specialized subject matter. And then anthology is, instead of being a magazine, either online or in print, is going to be an actual book, and is a collection of work by different authors. So the difference between a collection and an anthology would be that a collection is one author publishing all of their own, publishing, like, it's only one author. and an anthology is a bunch of different authors. So that's the very first thing that you're going to be looking for when you're submitting. But genre magazines can be anything from something like Amazing Stories that does science fiction, fantasy, and a little bit of horror, to to like Reader's Digest or something that's a very specific, looking for like a romance or some other kind of genre specifically.
And we want to mention about simultaneous submissions and previously published pieces, because some magazines will take that. Well, usually it'll be at a slightly lower rate, but there are also some that say they only want you to be exclusive, so you can't submit anywhere else because they don't want to deal with someone writing to them and withdrawing a piece. So when you read through the submission guidelines, be careful to note that and see which magazines will let you submit to several at once. Now, both of us have done slush pile reading, so one of the questions we get is, when does a slush pile editor stop reading a piece? And I think that depends on the person.
Yeah.
I'm willing, usually when I get something, I'm willing to skim. I'm a skimmer, so I will skim through the whole thing before I decide whether or not yes or no. Like, I'm willing to give them a chance. Like, maybe there's a gem in there, even if the first page is really awful. But I know others will stop right after a page, so it's a really subjective kind of process. But I don't know, Jen, what about you?
The same. And I think something else that you probably should know is that when you enter the slush pile, you're not likely to get, unless it's an incredibly small magazine, you're not likely to get the actual editor reading your work. If it's an organization of any size at all, you're probably going to get the lowest person on the totem pole getting your work first. And then if it makes the first cut, it gets passed up the food chain, and finally the editor will sign off on the final selections for the magazine. It can sometimes be to your disadvantage if you're writing something, especially if it's a little more challenging or a little bit more involved. Sometimes you'll find that that people stop reading your piece because it's I'm not saying it's not too good, but sometimes a piece that would appeal directly to the editor might not appeal to your average slush pile reader, who, I know that the film industry has this problem in particular because it's usually interns reading scripts. So if you've got like a 19-year-old reading a sophisticated script about some historical incident and full of heavy imagery, and you might not get the same kind of consideration. So the important thing to remember, I think, like with what JF was saying, the person that gets your piece, their taste is going, and their understanding of both literature in general and the genre that or literary magazine in particular, a lot is going to depend on whether or not they resonate with your piece. So one of the important things to always remember is that even if you get a rejection, you might not have gotten a rejection from a different slush pile reader.
And throughout all this, just remember, like, writing and editing is so subjective. You don't know sometimes when you submit something if they're looking for a particular theme. Like, sometimes they will say what theme they're looking for, and sometimes they won't. And sometimes it depends on the editor's day. So you really don't know what's going on. When you submit, just submit as much as you
when everyone's feeling good, send out everything. Send out everything today.
So just keep going and see what happens, right? Oops. So I think we already spoke a lot about this, about the selection process. Uh-oh. Oh no, why is it doing that? Okay.
Can you just, okay.
Okay, all right. Okay, common mistakes.
Why did you use a Zoom? Thank you so much.
I'm like, I don't want to end this. I don't want to end this. Common mistakes. So what are some of the biggest mistakes we see, and writing rules? Some of the biggest mistakes, I think sometimes when I'm editing, being a slush pile reader, and there's a theme and people don't follow it, I think that's a very easy mistake. Like, some people just want to send in stuff, right? And they don't necessarily pay attention. And if we're specifically publishing stuff about rockets, and then you send in a piece about a cat, like, it's not going to get selected. I think that's pretty easy to reject.
Unless it's a rocket cat. Sorry.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Turning up if you're out there alone. Yeah. I want
And
to write that story now.
yeah, you should. You should.
Sorry.
In regards to like writing rules, like I'm talking about like grammar and stuff like that. I'm actually not too picky about that because I think that even if someone sends in something and it's not totally perfect, I think the editor and the copy editor can work to clean it up. I think that if the story is good enough, then I think it's worth saving. It'll just take a bit more work, that's all. So when people say, you know, polish up your work before you send in, part of it is because, you know, they might be short-staffed and they don't want to spend too much time, or their time is limited, right? Like a lot of times, like sometimes some of these journals, they're run by volunteers, and you know, it's just, you know, they don't have a lot of hours, and even for paid staff, right, it's kind of limited. So
Well, and also, you know, if it's one thing if you have one piece in your magazine for a particular issue that has a lot of technical errors to clean up, but if you're dealing with every single one of them, it can get pretty frustrating, I think, for if you're on the other side of the desk. I think that everything you can do to make your manuscript as clean as possible, like free of spelling and grammar errors, and get another person's eyes on it. Getting somebody else to read over your work is probably one of the best things you can do before you submit. And the other thing I would highly recommend is to make sure that you read the submission guidelines from the particular journal or anthology that you're planning on submitting to. And that's things like, I mean, some slush pile readers will reject you if, for example, you don't double space. And they will reject you without even reading, because they'll take a look at the manuscript, they'll see the manuscript is single space, they'll say, oh, they didn't care enough. And that's what it is. They'll think that you didn't care enough to even read the instruction manual, basically. Like you didn't care enough to check out what they're looking for and how they want to see it. There's other people who will look at it anyway and read it anyway. I know that one thing that happened with Amazing Stories was that we had a blind submission policy. So that means that you don't put your name or any identifying information on your story. A lot of people did anyway, and some slush pile readers would reject the manuscript automatically based on that. And you wouldn't necessarily know that's why your story was rejected either. So depending on what kind of rejection you get, you might never know that it was just something as simple as you accidentally put your name on the manuscript.
yeah, they have specific. I find a lot of them follow the William Shun manuscript format. So usually they have a link and you click on it, and some websites actually have a template, and then you can follow their template.
Duotrope is a good resource for that. I think they cost money now, but it will direct you to not only the particular places to submit each individual piece that you have. You can actually track your submissions, and they'll also give you links to the website, and in particular the submission guidelines for any particular magazine or anthology you're looking to submit to.
And I wanted to sort of mention a little bit about the editor-writer relationship. I think sometimes there's some animosity with writers and editors. But I think, you know,
very few actual murders, though.
No, I'm not sure, actually. Are there any murders?
I love my editor. What are you talking about?
But okay,
and there are some very good relationships.
Yes. So I mean, an editor's job is to try to make the writer's words and their vision as clear as possible to the reader. So when they're giving you critiques and giving you suggestions, you have a choice. You don't have to follow them. But I mean, what they're trying to help you is what I'm trying to say. But you know, I've had some pushback sometimes from writers, and they explain, you know, I don't want to change this because blah blah blah. And you know, sometimes I'm like, okay, yeah, you have a point. I mean, I think there is some negotiation you can do. So you know, but okay, but saying this, like when I was doing a issue of Rice Paper magazine with Derwin, this is back when we had money, and we were doing a print issue for speculative fiction, and all these writers sent stuff in. There were 2 new writers, I remember. They've never been published before, and we were like, you know what, their story's pretty good, but there's like big loopholes, right? And we told these 2 writers, you know, we're willing to publish you if you think about, you know, how to close these loopholes. And 2 of them told us that they were perfect, and they refused to make any edits. And we're like, yeah, I guess we can't publish you, because at the end of the day, right, you have your work that we're going to publish, our name's going to be on it. Like, we want to make sure there's a certain level of quality as well. So if you're not willing to work with us, how are we going to make sure that your piece is the best as possible before we present it to the reader? Like, it's not fair to the reader. So, you know, like, having said that, like, you know, like, having a good relationship is important. And it's a matter of respect, you know, like, if you don't want to change something, let your editor know. But like, flat out saying no edits, that's like, yeah, that's the end. I mean, what else can I say? Right? It's like getting a divorce.
I think it's arrogant. Is that the word you're looking for? It's a little arrogant. Yes.
I was kind of shocked because they've never done this before. I'm like, really? What? You know, so
I sometimes think that's, I mean, it's definitely something where you've got to go into it with a certain amount of humility. But I think, like, what you're really nailing, though, I think, is that this business is about the relationships you're building. So you want to build a good relationship with the editor, and the editor is, with any luck, trying to build a good relationship with you as well. So there are times when your personality and the editor's personality are clashing, or you just aren't going to have a comfortable relationship with them. And sometimes, honestly, sometimes in the editing relationship, you just end up trying to get through the process and get your piece in publication and get your check, if there's a check in the offing. And sometimes you'll have a great relationship and you'll be invited to submit again. And I've had the experience of being approached because I've had a piece in a previous issue of a magazine, and they've asked if I would like to submit again to something, if I have something that's appropriate for something else that's upcoming. And those relationships you're building, you can learn a lot from how to work with anybody by learning to work properly with an editor. And it can be, I mean, like, I've had, in 1 year, I've had a story that required like 3 spelling, like, typo checks. Then that was it. That was all that happened to the story. And another one where I did probably 12 new drafts. And it just depends entirely on so many different small factors. But roll with it. You're gonna get a credit. You're gonna get some recognition. People are gonna read your work, and that's what the end goal is.
And you never know. Like, I got a rejection letter, and but then they said, you know, if you have anything new, please send it in. So it wasn't
nice.
You know, it was a nice rejection letter. So, okay, well, speaking of rejection, how to handle rejection.
It's our favorite subject. We love rejection.
Yes. Is it okay?
It gives you a chance to learn and
yes,
grow and cry and drink wine. And
now, is it okay to ask for feedback? I think it depends on the editor. I've had people ask me for feedback, and you know, it happened that day I had time, so I actually wrote quite a lengthy email about their piece and, you know, why it was rejected and what they could improve on. I've never gotten the same thing from any other editor, to be honest, but you never know. You can try to ask. But a lot of the bigger publications, right, like, they don't have time. New York or the Harper's, you know.
New Yorker won't even give you a rejection slip. They just tell you when to know by their silence that you have not been chosen.
Yes. Well, usually they tell you, like, if you don't get it and if you haven't heard anything in 3 months, it's usually
it's just like give up hope.
And I just thought, well, I mean, I don't think I need to mention it, but I should mention it. Is it appropriate to go on social media to rant? If you want to work with them again, I would just
those jerks at Rice Paper.
Hold back. Call your friends, call your parents, but, you know, don't go on social media, please. I mean, social media is like this record that's going to be around forever and ever and ever, and you don't know if, you know, one day, you know, like, you're going to be missing an opportunity because of something stupid you posted on Facebook.
Oh, you're the writer who called me an
rice paper.
Vincent, sorry?
Feel free to rant about rice paper. I'll even join you.
No. No, I was going to say, I really like the graphic I chose where you're proposing to this woman saying no.
I do like that too.
Please take me. So
And Zeus is in on it too. I think see the like thunderbolt in the background.
roles. So I mean, rejection is really, it's very common. I mean, all the great writers, you know, they all got rejected. J.K. Rowling got rejected so many times, but it's really being persistent. And what's that Einstein quote, right? Like about repeating things, repeating something is an insanity or something like that. So writers are,
Yeah.
yeah, writers are kind of crazy
For a
because,
writer, being crazy is just
yeah.
the basic.
So you just
It's
keep
just you.
trying and trying and trying and trying, and then by,
Insanity is I think the quote goes, insanity is doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I send out a lot of short stories. I think when I send out 100 queries, I might get 2 bites, which is, you know, that's my kind of ratio. This year I've sent out a whole bunch of stuff. I got accepted for 3 different things, but they were all free, so I'm not getting paid.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know what? You know, being a writer, if you're doing it for the money, I think you're in the wrong field because it's really hard to make money. But if you're doing it for the love of writing, I mean, count your successes and celebrate them, right? So, how to stand out? Oh boy. So, I mean, you're sending in something to a giant slush pile. How do you stand out? So, one thing a lot of editors see are like overused stories and plots, right? So, like, very common themes, very simple stories, you know what I mean? Like the love stories, boy meets girl, and they get married, and then that's it, right? And then you're sort of like, okay. So it's almost like you have to work your way into thinking about something unusual. And honestly, writers or editors are probably even worse because we do a lot of writing. So we're already spending all our time thinking about, you know, weird things to write about. And we're not surprised. Like that's the thing, right? Like we want to see something that shocks us. And that is very hard to do. So you will spend a lot of time thinking about plot lines and stuff like that. So
I tend to look for insight too. Like I
yes.
just my taste runs to stories that that don't just observe, but come to conclusions, or at least give me either a new way to look at something or look closer at something than I'm used to looking at it. Other people like different things. I mean, again, this is a time where taste comes in. But if you there are a lot of plots that we see a lot of, and a lot of stories we see a lot of. And if you have, if you, I think I don't know. I always think the best way to learn to write is to read other people's work, and the more you read, the more you probably will be able to see things that you don't want to repeat. And if you get an idea that you haven't seen before, even if it's sparked by something you've read, and you make it your own, chances are it's going to be unique, even if the story has similarities to other stories. If you find a way to make it your own, make it really specific. It's a strange thing, but I've always believed that if you write a story that's kind of generalized, like the characters are kind of every man or every woman, you're much more likely to have a story that doesn't actually connect with anyone. But if you're really, really specific and you make everything as real as possible with details and specific incidents, specific personalities, specific plots, specific challenges, you're much more likely to get something that's universal. And it's kind of a paradox, but I've really seen that.
Although I was gonna say it depends on the journal too. You might see
Oh,
some
it totally does.
literary journals are sort of, yeah, the everyman kind of thing. So it depends on who you're submitting to. Like if you know there's a certain style that you like, that you gravitate towards, then, you know, look for the journal that you think will accept you. Like, I mean, I write a lot of genre stuff, but then I know my science fiction stories aren't going to make it to the wars, so I would not submit to them. Right? You know. So one of the things, I don't know, I suggest to people is to maybe create a writer's profile. It's almost like your online resume. I think it's very common now, like when you write something, then people, like, they look at your name, like, have they ever done anything, you know, or whatnot. And actually on a panel,
all the times you've been charged by the police and ended up in the newspaper.
Well, I don't think that matters as a writer.
It might actually work in your favor. Look,
Yeah.
this person's famous.
You know, like, it's just helpful for the publishers and editors if they see maybe you've done something before, like, you know, they get a sense of your style. Could you help them? Like, especially sometimes with small presses, I've had submitted to one where they specifically ask, can you help us with marketing? And, you know, how, right? So you have to tell them, oh, I have a website, I have Twitter, I have Facebook. So, you know, I can help you do some marketing if you want, that sort of thing. And it's almost, sometimes I think you're almost expected to, like when the book comes out, they'll send you, you know, graphics and whatnot. And they're like, can you put this on your social media, blah, 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 and, you know, help them with making a blurb, right? So, so it's sort of like having such a digital identity. Like when you look up your name, what do you see, right? So, yeah. And then maybe if you have enough stuff, it'll take away that, you know, mugshot in the police station, right?
I had a friend who directed a play for me, and that was the thing that came up first in her search results for Google for years. And the play was called "I Was a Small Town Stripper Until I Became a Big City Lesbian," and she was teaching children's courses at the time. So yeah, so she just had to build a media presence that was more powerful than that particular play. I felt kind of bad.
Yeah, Jen and I had edited a book called Trump, Utopia or Dystopia, with short stories about Trump, which we found, it was mostly satire. It was quite entertaining. But one of the authors did contact me and he said, you know, I'm going to be a children's author's book now. Can you remove my name from everything as much as you can? I told him there were certain things I couldn't, like Goodreads, I couldn't take his name off because that was Amazon control. But on my website, like the Dark Helix website, on all the other marketing material, I could take his name off, but I can only do so much.
Yeah.
Anyway. And one last piece of advice, I think, is just to practice, practice, practice. Because, like, I mean, the editor's job is, you know, to make sure your ideas come forward clearer, but it's still up to the writer to write, right? And there are lots of different ways you could practice. You can practice on your own, of course. There's writing classes, there's clubs, conferences. But, you know, understanding that it is it could be a very expensive hobby, especially with the conferences and stuff. Although now with COVID, I mean, it's all online. But, I mean, before, you know, flying somewhere in person is, you know, you're talking about 1,000, 2,000. COVID.
Did you just say thank you, COVID, for?
No. Well, yeah, well, because of COVID, it's all online, is what I'm trying to say. But it's still not the same. I think, you know, like you make your deeper connections in person. Like I met Jen at a conference in person, right? So I think if I saw her in a Zoom room, I'd just ignore her. I mean, you know, I'm just saying.
It's true. It's true.
We'll just ignore each other. So, you know.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like, there's not as much opportunity to chat afterwards.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
As we were saying before, like this business, like especially like the arts, a lot of it's built on relationships. And I know a lot of people who've done pretty well out of taking, say, a course on publishing or a course on short story writing that's taught by an editor or a publisher, and starting to build connections that way. Personally, I'm kind of an introvert when it comes to, I mean, I'm an extrovert when I'm out there, but I'd really rather just be alone in my room. So sometimes it's hard for me to even try to be building those relationships, but you don't need that many good relationships to really help your career out.
So I run a writing circle for the Canadian Authors Association, and well, it's virtual, but I think that's probably worth the time to think about a writing circle where you're in a small group, you read to each other, and it's a safe space so that you could give each other feedback. Because sometimes you don't know what you're doing wrong. Like, you know, I've been told I have too much dialogue, right, and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, okay. Or, you know, really small things, or the pacing of your story isn't right. And then you sort of rework it, right? So you're all working together to become better. Like, it's not a place where you're just, you know, beating each other down with a stick. Although, in a way, those are the best critiques too. I don't know. I like being beat down with a stick. Like, so you know what's wrong.
Personality match, right?
It's like, honestly, if someone reads it and they're too nice, they're like, oh yeah, it's really nice. And you're like, yes, but what was wrong with it, right? Because I want to fix it. So I don't know what's wrong with it. I've done writing classes at Ryerson. I finally graduated. I was hoping to hold on for the student discount, but they kicked me out. So I finished a certificate at Ryerson. I thought it was all right. I took a few courses. one of the instructors was excellent, and I'm still in touch with her. And, you know, like she has a reading series and she's asked me to come in and read for her. And, you know, she's willing to work with you on future stuff. Hit and miss, right? Like I had another instructor that told me maybe your stories will only be read by Chinese people. And I'm like, wow, that's not sure what to say about that, you know?
Did you say maybe your stories will only be read by people who are nasty?
Oh my God. I think she didn't mean to be racist. I don't know how to say it. Like, you know what I mean? Like she seemed genuinely trying to give feedback. I don't know how to describe it. But I was
it's all about where the feedback is coming from, right?
I had such high opinion of them until I heard that. I'm like, what? You disappoint me so much. It was $500 for this class.
Oh, that sucks. Just to be told that you're a Chinese niche author and that's it.
So, I mean, all the universities have, and colleges, they have continuing writing courses. It's hit and miss. I mean, like the instructor that I really liked also teaches at U of T. She's like, you're getting it cheaper here at Rejection than at U of T. So, you know, but it's the same course. And I thought about doing an MFA, but my husband won't let me. He said no more school. But I've heard that those are really good to do that because it forces you to sit down and practice and practice and practice, right? So it depends on your budget and your time, I guess, right? Like what.
Well, another thing too is that you can actually look at editing courses as well. Yeah, I mean, some people have a skill or a fondness for editing, but editing courses are a good place to meet people in the business as well. Okay. And you might learn something too.
So let's see, anything else? I think we spoke about a lot of things already. And so if there was one piece of advice that we should give to people to get out of the slush pile, what would it be?
I think that you kind of are the exemplary, you're the exemplar of how to get out of the slush pile, which is keep putting yourself in the slush pile. It is a numbers game in a lot of ways. And my particular strategy is start with the highest prestige magazine that would take the story that I'm writing, and then work my way down the list.
I have to admit, I keep a spreadsheet, so it's useful to sort of keep track of where you submit.
Yeah.
Messy spreadsheet. But anyhow, I noticed over time, like you said, like I submitted to the higher tiered, and then eventually a lower tiered might have taken it, right? But you know, it's turning green.
And you might as well start at the top because you know that's the biggest bang for your buck. The one piece of advice I would give people, though, is something that Stephen King said, and that's when you send out your manuscript, just consider that you have put on the envelope to the person who can truly appreciate and enjoy this story. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it comes back not at this address. Mm-hmm. And it's just, you know, you just go on to the next person.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's see if you guys want to unmute yourself, ask questions or anything. Vincent?
Was I like a bad client when you were editing my stuff?
What was the question?
Was I a bad client?
The worst writer we've ever had to work with?
Yeah, basically.
I think all of the ones I've worked with, okay, fine. There was one I ended up not publishing. But I thought their story was pretty good, but they were bugging me about publishing timelines. So you have to understand, as an indie press, a small press, it's only me and like maybe one other person. Like, you know, it's not like we have a company. We're not Random House. And they were getting annoyed that, you know, we weren't publishing the book right away. And it takes time, especially if it's an anthology with 30 people. Like, we have to individually work with 30 people. And they just, well, I mean, I think part of it is they have a disability too. So all their letters to me were in giant capital letters. J.F. Garrard! When is this book coming out? And all this crap. And I was like, oh. And then eventually, you know, then I tell them, I apologize. But then after the third letter, I'm just like, oh, forget it. You know, I'm like, okay, you know, withdraw your story, right? Like, I mean, what can I say? Like, you have to be patient. Like, just because someone accepts you, it's not going to be right away. You're probably looking at a year, two, and if it's an anthology, sometimes a year and a half, 2 years, it depends. So just be patient. Eventually your story will come out.
If a book or something is picked up by a press, you're going to be looking 2 years minimum. Like they've got 2 years of catalog that they've already got booked for release. So you're not going to see your book in print for a minimum of 2 years after you've finished working on it. Like timelines can be long, and that's why you go on to the next story. That's why you start working on the
keep
next
writing and keep submitting to the next story. Yeah.
I was going to recommend a book to you too. Douglas Smith, Canadian award-winning Canadian author. He wrote a book called Playing the Short Game, and it's a great kind of step-by-step guide to the publishing process and how to not only get your work written and published, but how to use the reprint market to continue to publish the same stories over and over again and make more money off them. He's got stories that are in circulation. He kind of has good ways of figuring out when to send out a story that you've already had published and who to send it to. And there's a lot of really great inside information in the book. And it's short. Not that that's the only thing I look for in a book.
Yeah, lately I've noticed too, a lot of markets, like they're free. They're started up by indie presses and stuff, and they might not pay. But at the same time, if all the paying markets don't want the story, just getting your writing out there, even if it's free, I think, it's worth sharing your story. And, so.
Yeah, and also sometimes the credits, even if they're unpaid credits, especially in Canada, I find like just being able to say that you've been published in X number of magazines, even if you're not getting money, if you've got a contract, that actually can help you. And in Canada, I think most people who are writing for a living are making at least a certain amount of their money from grants. And to have grants, you need to have credits. So it's less about making money from the publisher and more about making money from the publisher through the granting agency or for the granting agency directly. And any credits that are considered prestigious enough will help you with that.
Okay, so we only have 4 more minutes, and then we're going to be jumping into another panel in which our immersion authors are going to be doing readings, and Vincent's going to be chairing. So I will take a break.
So the link to that the new password is also in the same.
Yeah, it's on the same website.
Rice paper.
Yeah,
the same website.
Yeah, I posted all 3 events, so all 3 are up. And hopefully, people will find us. I posted it on social media that you guys should go to the website. So
okay.
That's unfortunate, but
I think you should definitely complain to Zoom, because I'm sure they don't get enough complaints from like every single seminar that I've actually been involved with. I love this whole like there's always a technical difficulty, just always.
Well, I mean, I did 2 panels before this, and well, there were still technical difficulties, but it wasn't like the meeting was just deleted. I think this time I've had that. So I was just panicking a bit before this all started.
So does anyone want to go skiing?
No.
Or grab a hot chocolate, maybe?
Yes, I would love to. Looks like Christmas there.
I love this one. I like my other backdrop too. But were there any questions? Like, does anybody have anything specific they want to talk about? Or
No, I think I'll.
That's my library.
Yeah, I'm joining the next one as well, so I'll take the 2 minutes.
Okay, take the 2 minutes.
Get a drink or something. Yeah, exactly.
But,
thank you so much. Yeah.
And yeah, if you have any questions, like, I mean, you can find us on social media, and I think I have my email.
The website.
So on the website. Okay.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So much.